Today on the show, we have kaNO, art hustler extraordinaire. kaNO is a multidisciplinary creative on all fronts, from silver screen to museums, even on toy shelves across the globe. His style is distinctly recognizable on its own. In New York, classic fashion, kaNO graduated from High School of Art and Design and went on to obtain his BFA in animation at the School of Visual Arts in 1999. When he's not working at Warner Brothers Animation, you can find him in his art studio working on collaborations with notable clients such as Brisk, Metacom, G-Shock, NBA, Jordan's, Marvel, DC Comics, Netflix, and Universal, just to name a few. As his creative pursuit expands, so does his ever-growing list of clients and exhibitions. With 20 plus years in art biz, kaNO is committed to finding excitement and motivation at the turn of every corner. His authenticity and energy is what he strives to express in his work and collaboration. His mission, to simply represent it to the fullest.
Welcome to another episode of Origins. Thank you so much for being here, kaNO. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Let's do this.
Awesome. So we'll start off the same way we start every episode. Can you tell us a little bit about your creative origin story and tell us how did you get to where you are now?
Creative origin. Well, born and raised in New York City, I grew up drawing, watching cartoons, and later as a teenager, like doing graffiti and skateboarding. It sounds like the story of like every middle-aged creative at this point, but it's true. I skateboarded through late 80s and the 90s, and that's how I got around the city. That's how I actually learned how to ride the trains in New York. Funny enough, most of the kids I skateboarded with were artists. Everybody in New York at the time when I was a kid was doing graffiti. Everybody had a tag. The kids that I wanted to be as good at in skateboarding ended up being the kids I wanted to draw as good as. And my friends would wear an Akira t-shirt. I'd be like, what's Akira? And that's how I would find out. So they were older than me and into comics. And that's how I found out about all that stuff and even comic book shops. And eventually I always had an interest in cartoons because I grew up watching cartoons. And I went to a school in New York City called High School of Art and Design. And funny enough, that's where a lot of my skateboard friends went. So that's why I mainly went there. And by going there, I was exposed to a lot of different types of art, comic books, animation, cartooning, illustration. And I was a real geek when it came to like learning about new art tools. The first time I saw like an airbrush, or the first time I saw somebody use a white paint marker or a certain type of ruler or a right angle, I was always really nerdy about that stuff. It was almost like watching a magician do a magic trick with like new tools. So I was always really geeky about that stuff. I was that kid that was like, yeah, what kind of pen does Jim Lee draw with? You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. So that's how I grew up. The comic books, graffiti. Eventually, I was old enough to learn more about these things, and I went to High School of Art and Design, and then I went to School of Visual Arts, where I majored in animation. And then after that, well, during school, I got an internship at MTV Animation, and that's where my career sort of began in the animation industry. It was back in the late 90s. Here I am today, working in all the studios and getting to design toys and painting murals, and getting to live the dream, as they say.
I love that, especially as a fellow New Yorker. And I'm much older. So I know similar people with a similar past. And it's the beauty of living in New York. You get exposed to it. High School of Art and Design's a phenomenal place. I can name the names that went to that place. And so you're surrounded by it, right? It's not like you're stuck in Wisconsin in the middle of somebody's farm. It's like this internship, which I always find interesting. Like everybody's like, I went to the High School of Art and Design, and now I'm working at XY Studio as a famous artist. But you started as this intern at MTV. I'm curious, what did you learn there? What did they have you doing? How did it help you get from the internship to the next evolution of your career?
That's a good question. So I get hired. I find out about internships when I'm at the School of Visual Arts. A friend of mine named Paul, he was an animator, and he was the first one that I knew that actually went to get an internship. And he got an internship on, back in the days, MTV did this show called Celebrity Deathmatch. And he was like an intern on that show. And we all were like, we're all kind of like just like being goofballs in college. And here's the first guy who does something very proactively for himself. And as soon as he did that, it kind of set the tone for the rest of the group of our friends. That's the next step. That's what everyone's doing. I applied. Thankfully, I had like a good GPA and I was able to get a portfolio. I got the internship. And then when I actually was there, I wasn't doing anything but running errands and making Xeroxes. I wasn't doing anything, but what it did do, it opened the door for me to go into a professional environment. And now face to face, I'm seeing the artists whose job I want to have when I grow up. It's a reality to me. Before that, I don't know anyone who has a professional job as an artist. But now, as an intern, I have to go around artists and talk to them, see if they need a supply list. And I have to go to Pearl Paint on Canal Street, get it, and bring it back to put on their drafting tables. I'm the guy, if they need something, I'm the guy to go get it. This is in the 90s. So I would go up to a designer and they would give me a list of references that they needed of like images. So I would go down to the Midtown Public Library and have to go through magazines and look for, I was like Google image for them. So I had to come back with a manila folder full of pictures for them to look through so they can design a car, a 1956 Chevy or whatever it is. Yeah, I was pretty much Google, right? So I did that and I can't say I learned how the job is done by being there. So that when I was a senior and I was given a test to do that job, I had a huge advantage because I saw how they did it. I prepared things for their job. So I was like, all right, okay, easy, character layout. This is how they do it because I look at it. I'm Xeroxing all of the character layout drawings before it gets sent to Korea. I'm Xeroxing it to get shipped. So I'm looking at all of them. All day, I'm just Xeroxing these drawings, seeing the amount of posing that goes into each scene, how on model it has to be. That's where my advantage was. Vice versa, right? This was 1999, 97, 98. I'm learning Photoshop for the first time at SVA. And I'm interning at a studio where there's no digital ink and paint. They're all animation cells. So when they do get their first computer in, I'm an intern who knows how to use Photoshop. And they're like, how do you do this? And I'm like, I paint bucket. That like, I don't know. Like, I'm just learning it, but I know more than they do. So automatically that makes me a more valuable asset. So they want me in the ink and paint room now, and they don't want me running around doing Xeroxes. I get to paint cells. I get to teach them a little bit of digital stuff. And I find my way doing more artistic things. And that's kind of how it evolved for me. And when I was able to take a test, I did good on the test. I didn't do great, right? I probably didn't do that well, probably not enough to get the job if I had an intern there. But the internship kind of showed them that I'm a person who's always wanting to get better and I'm reliable. So that put me above the rest and I got the job.
Super cool. And thanks for sharing, because I think a lot of people, I think it's easy to look at someone who has maybe interned and then they get hired. You're like, oh, well, it's because they interned there. The reality is that internship is you being able to prove yourself and show the value and kind of create a narrative for the hiring manager or whoever is hiring to like see that you're an asset that they want to keep. I'd love to hear a little bit more. Is that something you feel like you've continued on as you've grown? You're at MTV Animation, you're now hired there, and then like you've transitioned into other studios in animation and toy design. Like, is that kind of work ethic and showing up and doing the good work kind of what's carried you through, do you think?
That's part of it, but a big part of it also is kind of reading the room, seeing how everyone is playing the game. It's a weird thing. Like when we want to come into this industry as artists, a lot of us are coming in as artists with not having parents or any guidance of anyone who's done it before, right? Usually it's looked at as a disadvantage. But for me, it was like an advantage because it made me want to listen to everybody and look at what everybody was doing. So when I got the job at MTV, one of the things that I noticed right away were like that the more experienced animators on my team or character layout guys and girls, they always had freelance work that they were doing. At lunchtime, the people who would freelance would come back from lunch with like a FedEx box full of freelance that they were going to do for the weekend. And I was always like, what do you get in there? Like, what's that? what is that? Like I was always curious and asking questions. It's like, oh, I'm doing this thing. They need some freelancers. That I started asking. I was like, oh, like they let you do that? Like work on another show? Like, yeah. So I started seeing the importance of freelancing while you're on a show, so that when your series ends, you have another job connection to like another show. And you could keep the wheel turning of employment. That was one of the things I learned quickly. I was kind of trying to like time your next job overlapping with the one you have now. That I learned from just keeping an eye out, just like I was asking my friend about internships, my coworkers about freelance. Later on, when I got into pitching shows, I was very inquisitive about that. I was trying to find out, what does development do? What does that entail? What do I need to do? From that, doing that from animation, from job to job, at a certain point, I wanted to do something a little more independent, whether it was like a comic book, a toy, or something. I wanted to do something that was less art by committee and more something that I could be fully responsible, because I knew I had drive and I wanted to see things to the end. But sometimes when you have a show in development, working on a show, you don't get to see it for another year, or so years go by and you don't get to see it. So I wanted to do my own thing, and like I got into self-published a comic book. I put out an art book, and then ultimately I put out a toy that began sort of like the secondary art career in toy design. And that's also something that I learned about. I came through, I had a friend named Jared Deal that I worked with in animation. And one day he just comes in with a box and he opens it up. It's one of his sculpture, one of his toys, but it was in a box and everything, like an actual toy from a store. It blew my mind. Like I was like, how did you do that? Like how did this? He was like, well, I started with a sculptor. I'll give you his name, and I kind of did the same steps that he did, but I kind of just never stopped. I just kept doing it and doing it. At the time, I had some money saved. I was young and I didn't really have any kids or anything. So I was like, not knowingly, it wasn't like in hindsight, oh, I invested in myself. I knew I was going to do it. It was like, it was nothing like that. I was naive and stupid. I had money. So I was irresponsible. I paid to get a toy done, and 500 toys showed up to my apartment. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And through that, being stuck with that problem, I ask a bunch of questions and ask around. Ultimately, I get a distributor. They're able to handle all the toys, and my toys get out there, and everything sells out, and I'm able to fund my next project. It's about doing the work, but it's also about learning and asking questions. And sometimes, if I knew somebody who was like an animator and did everything, I would kind of be following their footsteps too closely, maybe, in order to let any of this serendipitous things happen for me, you know?
Ken, I love this story so much. And by the way, shout out to Pearl Paint. I miss it. It's gone. My first paycheck from Marvel, that's where I ran to. But what I love about your story is, and I think all good creative people have this, is I call it the hustler. You're in that spot and you just want to absorb, you want to learn, you want to ask. I'm going to ask you this. When you were Xeroxing stuff, did you ever Xerox? I used to Xerox for Marvel, and I always made an extra copy. Did you ever make the extra copies to take home and look at?
I did. It's funny because I ended up doing later, when I started working professionally, things weren't all digital yet. So I got to do the job where like I was drawing all day. So sometimes if I really liked something, I would kind of make a color Xerox of it and hand the color Xerox in and keep the original. So I would do that. So I have some originals that I kept of my. But Xeroxes, after I might have done it like my first or second week, Xeroxing and keeping some stuff, but I got asked to Xerox so much that I just didn't put any value on it anymore. Like after like 2 weeks, I'm literally sitting there in front of the Xerox machine reading a book, and it's just going, going, going. My only job really was to make sure that machine didn't jam. That's like the only reason I'm there.
When I started Marvel as an intern, that was mine. And I'm making up numbers, but let's say I had to make 4 copies. I made 5 and 1 for home, and then I would take it and study it.
Yes,
Anyways, this is fabulous. You're learning from everybody. I'm curious, you're meeting all these people and everything else. Who were some early big influences on you? And even like people you met or other things that turns kaNO into kaNO?
There's many different ones, right? One of the earliest influences, I have to say, not in a weird way, but like, so I have a friend named Kimson, right? He's a professional animator. He works here in Burbank now. But I met this guy when I was like 14, and me and my friends were cutting school, and we went to his place in Brooklyn, and he made beats. Like all my friends were like rappers. And I just remember he was a senior at NYU, and he was working on the Beavis and Butthead show. So to me, already, this was the most successful person I've ever met. First time I met him, I remember just being like, wow, I was looking at the Beavis and Butthead drawings, and I was like, wow, this is a person who kind of, I don't really know him, but it stayed ingrained in my head. In my circle of friends, I'm connected to somebody who's actually doing it. So that must mean I can do it. I took that and that stayed in my head. Eventually, when I ended up working at MTV, I linked up with him. We caught up and all that. But he's one of my early influences. And then I think a lot of the influences I got from different people I work with. I'm always like paying attention to people and like asking questions. Well, that goes for people's work ethic. Like I remember I had a friend at MTV named Warren O'Neill. He's a Canadian dude. And he had like the cleanest lines and he was like one of the best character designers. He was such a good animator. But I watched how he worked, and he worked in a passive manner, like kind of really thinking about what he was drawing. I wasn't trained to do that. I was trained coming out of SVA is how much drawing can you do in the shortest amount of time? Model drawing, gesture drawings, like you're an animator, you get paid by how fast you can animate. So a lot of times I would rush through things when I didn't need to. But when I used to look at his drawings and look how he approached it, I automatically, in my own work, it made me slow down and spend time with my lines and kind of like really finesse things and not be in this manic state of mind of like flipping paper and drawing. That kind of put me in a different mindset that I wasn't trained in. It helped my work get better because I was just focusing on quality over quantity. So he was one. And then I had another friend named Dino Alberto. He was also an animator. And this is when we were like in our early 20s. So I would go to work, finish my job in animation, like 6:30, like on a Thursday. And then I was off to the races. I was partying, we were clubbing out all night. Thursday, show up to work on Friday, go out all night, come back home on Sunday. I remember dropping by his place one time on a Friday, like at 2 in the morning. And it was me and my wife at the time. We were just going out. So I just popped up, knocked on my friend's door, 2 o'clock, he let us up. We come up and all of our friends are partying. Even we're partying. We just happen to be going from one club to the next, and he lived in between, right? So I go there, and he's just in his apartment painting at 2 o'clock in the morning. Music on. It's not for a show. It's not for a deadline. It's just for him, right? And that, at an early age, that reminded me that this art thing is a thing that you are, right? You're an artist. You always create, not just when you're on the clock, when you leave, but you should always be making something. And it just looks so dope. Like I remember visually, I could like paint it. It was just like cool New York loft, and he's just working on his paintings. So after that, I was like, man, I didn't want to party so hard. I kind of just wanted to have time to make my stuff. But there was a shift there, and he was like a big influence for that. Yeah.
That's so cool to hear, kind of like that, these really pivotal moments in your life. And kind of going off that, you mentioned a little bit about the coming out of SVA, and you're really about like talking about moving paper, just drawing in like a franticness. Anyone who's studied illustration out of school always hears about, oh, well, like you want to get fast because you can get paid more, right? Now you're kind of experiencing this different way of thinking of focusing on quality over quantity. Could you talk just a little bit about how you've thought about that for your own art, like the quality versus quantity? I don't know if that's a debate, but just that idea.
I think that in my own work, it's become more of spending time on things. I wish I could draw something so spontaneously. And basically, these days, in order for me to draw something that looks spontaneous, like I just did it on a whim, it takes time to finesse that for me. Like I really want to spend time in it. Final product of it looks like I just whipped it up in a second, but really it's me finding the right precise lines and making sure sometimes I want a tangent there, sometimes I don't. So things are like you really finesse it a lot for me. That's how I am now. Maybe it's because I took a step back and decided to spend more time instead of just instinctually trying to get it. Maybe I would be on a different page of that right now. But I feel like I would just rush through things a lot. Like I look at the stuff I look at old sketchbooks and I look at old drawings that I did, and I'm like, why was I in such a rush for that? And it's because you're trained to like you said in illustration, if you're a comic book guy, you get paid per your speed of how many pages you draw. But like, and that's great if you're Jack Kirby and you can knock shit out like nothing, right? But if you're a guy who's kind of like learning it, you're going to end up putting out a lot of artwork that's like just plowing through it. Last year, I was working on a project with Bruce Timm, and one of the notes he gave me was, in general, he gave the whole team this note, was like, think more, draw less, right? So it's like, oh, that's pretty simple. Think about what you're drawing and you won't have to redo it 3 times, right? When you're younger, you're thinking draw more. The mileage equals a good drawing. That's what you're always taught. And there is truth to that, but they're also like, if you're not on the clock, spend time with that drawing. Right? Why rush through it?
That's so true. And I love this think more, draw less. Because to me, artists are problem solvers. The good artists are problem solvers. That's thinking about stuff before you get to the stuff. And John Romita Sr. was one of my early teachers and mentors. And he always told me, I never liked anything I ever drew, ever, because it's
Yeah.
for comics. To your point, right? You just had to whip it out. There's not a
Yeah.
chance to stop and think about it.
And then, like, also, it's weird because, like, what I just said, right? That note from Bruce Timm is for that particular moment. This is animation production. We're designing characters. Think more, draw less, so we don't have to keep looking at the same version of this drawing again and again, right? But then there's also people who will say, draw more, think less, because there's magic in there also, right? Like spontaneous things. So it's really a balance of what fits for you. Like, what kind of artist are you? Are you the kind of artist that could just kind of freestyle and whip it out? Then amazing. If you're somebody like James Jean, who's more methodical about drawing and anatomy, then you have to spend time with it, right? There is no one rule. Like what applied to me 2 months ago may not apply to what I'm doing right now. So I think it's also a big mistake to say this is the standard rule, this is the golden rule, and because it does adjust, and you have to adjust to it.
To your point, it depends on what I'm doing, what I'm working on, right? What's my end creative goal that I'm trying to create, and how do I end up creating it?
That has to do not just in what you're creating, but whatever you're working on right now. What is the project for? If it's for a client, it's a completely different mindset than if it's for a gallery. And if it's for a gallery, it's a different mindset if it's for yourself, right? When you're doing it for a gallery, now you have the introduction of, oh, this piece kind of has to sell. So that's another dynamic now that you're kind of like playing with, right? As opposed to something that just lives in your sketchbook that is like whatever you want. It's always different.
That's a really great point, and I want to kind of dig in a little bit more and pick your brain on this. So,
Mhm.
how do you parse what you see as something that's like marketability? Because I think most creatives, obviously, even if we're making this art for ourselves, we want to sell it ideally, right? Like we all want the
Mhm.
sold out toy run, we all want sold out gallery show. How much are you changing your designs for yourself versus what, like, you mentioned like, oh, if I'm going into a gallery, I have to do something quote unquote, that more likely to sell.
Mm.
Do you find like you're editing yourself a lot, or can you tell me just more about your thought process around that?
I don't think I edit myself much at all, but I'm also not a millionaire. So I keep it real with myself. And but if I'm gonna keep it super real to myself, if I was drawing or painting things with other corporate IPs in my artwork, I'd probably be making a shitload of money right now. That's a lane that I'm purposely choosing not to go down. So I'm doing my own thing. And I'm lucky enough that when I started doing toy stuff that year, I was also I put out my own little independent comic book. And I was learning how to do the comic book circuit thing met all the comic stores in New York and all the buyers and stuff. And I went to do this comic convention with a couple of friends of mine. My friend Kari Randolph, who's like a known comic book guy. I went to school with him, so we started doing conventions and doing artist alleys and stuff like that. I'd never done that before. So I'm there. All of my friends work on comic books. I don't. So, but I'm sitting with them. So they're doing sketches for people for like $15 or $20. I have like a little ash can of my own like drawings from my black book, and I'm selling that. And it's going pretty good. And then my friends get pretty booked on drawing stuff, commissions, and I'm there like kind of just with my hands crossed, like not doing nothing. And this guy's like, "What do you do? Could you draw me like a Ninja Turtle and Optimus Prime or whatever?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't work on any of those things. Like I work in animation and like And he's like, just give me what this is your book. And he looks at my drawings and he says, I just want something in your style. Your style is cool. Just draw anything. I'll give you $20. Right. And once I got a taste of that, I was like, oh, there's people that like my stuff enough that they just want to pay for my art. Not me drawing superheroes or drawing anything, but just my art. So I started thinking of that. I started thinking of toys, and I was already collecting toys, and how like all my characters are already sort of urban because I come from New York, and I'm seeing all these toys from Hong Kong look like they're from New York, but they're not. They're just like kind of they're kind of just drawing our street culture. So I'm kind of like, oh man, well, I'm like the actual McCoy, like I'm the guy that's from here, and I draw this. So like, why am I not making it? So I am thinking about it. I'm mainly more thinking about it when I create products that I have to front the money for. Sometimes it's like a small toy or a print, and it's always a gamble. Like I never have it locked in. It's like sometimes you could read the room. Like if the toy industry is in a bad place and people don't have the disposable income and nobody's really buying things, then don't put out a $50 toy. Like save that for another time, right? The prints, I've done times when prints, I'm selling them left and right. And then there's times where I think I put out a really good print at a good price and it just sits there. And I'm like, oh, that looks bad, right? So there's like, I wish I had the recipe for it, right? With galleries, sometimes if I'm doing stuff, I won't edit my work, but I'll sort of art direct according to their fan base, right? It's not to say I'm always going to paint, what I do, what I create, but I'm not like if I'm going to show at a place like Giant Robot and I know there's not street culture in there, I'm not gonna introduce any like sneaker hype pieces. That'll get lost in there. There's more about the storytelling, right? If I'm gonna what's the other gallery that shows all the animators and illustrators? Nucleus. If I'm gonna do something at Nucleus, it's got to be a little bit more narrative, more storytelling. I'm gonna use more of my animation chops of art direction for a piece there. If I'm showing at a graffiti gallery, all that is out the window. Nobody gives a shit. It's about graffiti. Like it's about like hip hop. It's about my graffiti steeds, you know? So in that way, it's kind of like I'm in these different compartments and I just have to adjust. Like art direct your selection. Just like when you're working at conventions. If you're working at a Mocha comic book convention and then like another like street fair, it's like you're bringing things that you think they might like, you know, but it's still yours, right? It's still from your collection or your series of work. So it's like that. And thankfully, with the stuff that I do, the toy stuff, I always came into it thinking I want to create stuff that I would like as a fan. And if I like it as a fan, then there's got to be at least 100 people out there that get me, that are around my age, get my references, understand where I'm coming from, and can relate to that piece or toy or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, I got two questions, so I only get to pick one at a time. I'll get this later one because I'm being told I have to ask that question of you. While we're on this thread, I want to keep going because you're talking about like doing toys and doing galleries and doing this and doing this and switching, but it's still got to be kaNO, right? It's still got to be
Yeah.
authentic to you and your heart, right? And it's still
Yeah.
got to be your look, right? How did you find your style? I don't really know how to ask this question the right way. Like, there's a kaNO style. What makes kaNO style? What is in your heart that makes it a kaNO, right?
No, I get what you're saying because it's a question I get asked a lot because like my art is almost like my brand, right? Basically like I think what you're asking is a question that a lot of artists ask and it's basically how did you come up with your style, right? Your style becomes like your trademark almost, not legally, but people see it and they know you did it. It's like your imprint. In my case, it sort of became my brand through product and all that stuff. So for me, I was same crossroads when I was like in my early 20s. You're especially if you're working as a sort of an artist for hire in different studios, in different companies, you're like, how do I become that person who has a style, who gets like called on for to do a project based on their style? So for me, it took a while to get. And my style basically comes from different elements of different disciplines. So when I worked in animation, one of my first jobs was cleanup and in betweening for animators. So cleanup, you have to have an inking, and cleaning, you have to have a really straight, consistent line. So I was doing that forever. I never unlearned that. That just became my steady hand. And through inking and doing all of that, I always had like a childhood sort of flow that came from graffiti, right? Tags and movements and arrows and like swerves. That always carried into my animation work. So now I'm learning how to ink and clean those things up. And now that I'm learning how to do that, I have an appreciation for artists that do it really well. So who's the top of the, like Al Hirschfeld, right? It's like, boom, he's the guy. He's the guy. He's a New Yorker. Al Hirschfeld, the Lion King, right? It's like, of course he's gonna be who I look at. He's like my favorite, almost like my favorite rapper kind of dude, right? So I'm looking at his ink line, and it's not just an ink line, it's also design. It goes from being a fill to an outline to being textures to wrapping back around. So I see a lot of different ways of flipping it. And I would be like, well, I'm gonna be like the graffiti version of that. And that's kind of where I started developing it. Like I'm gonna draw characters in the way that he drew like portraits of celebrities, but I'm gonna draw just regular hood characters, and it's gonna have that flow because I come from animation, I come from graffiti, and then I'm not going to get involved in the details and the renderings of things because I'm sort of an animator, and simplicity is like, straight lines against curves. Like then Batman BTAS season 3 comes out, or season 4, where everything is angular. The whole look of Batman changes. The logo is like angles, everything is angles, curves to lines, straight edges. And I'm like, that's strong, it's graphic, and it just punches you in the face. That's kind of what I want. I want clean, bold things. And just after doing that and doing that, and then also this thing happens that while I'm learning that and while I'm doing animation as a career, I switched from being an animator to a character designer. And now when I'm doing character designs in animation, everything has to move in 3D spaces. There's cheats, but usually you have to do turnarounds and everything. So there's that, and there's all these rules to it. I'm spending so much time in that world that my natural way of rebelling against it is when I go into my sketchbook, I want there to be tangents now. I want there to be things that I'm not supposed to do at work because I'm the boss here. I get to make the rules. So like every note that I get at my job becomes fuel for me to do whatever the fuck I want in my sketchbook, right? So it just like kind of grows and grows, and then like now this is my world, and through that process, now it becomes your style of drawing, your safety, where you go when you want to just draw your own thing. And then when I started getting opportunities to show like in group shows, a style that already exists in my sketchbook that I could pull on. I'm not trying to invent something because a show came up. I already kind of been doing it. And what I'm talking about is like 15, 16 years in the making before I start to really like own it as my own thing. It's not like, I don't know how it happens for everybody else, but for me, it wasn't just something that I started doing. It's something that grew with all the different jobs that I had and like all the projects that I did and stuff like that. And then when I'm kind of like putting together a website, I remember being younger and trying to put together a consistent website. And it was hard because my mind was everywhere and my drawings were everywhere. It looked like a group show, like 10 different artists did it. It wasn't dialed in because I didn't have like that anchor to pull from. I started creating work and I kind of had my identity to myself of what my work should look like. Then it became much easier. Like right now, it'll be the thing where like I do a drawing of somebody and it would start off looking kind of like them, and then I'll bring it back to where it feels like it's a right balance of me, of the likeness and my style. That's where it is.
Super helpful to hear, kaNO, because I think a lot of artists, to your point, they're like, oh, like how do I find my style? And well, you kind of just have to spend some time making a bunch of art, really dialing in what you're trying to
Yeah.
say and where you're coming from. When you were kind of coming up through the scene, what was the hardest part for you to kind of keep going while, to your point, like haven't really dialed in on what your style is. Yeah, just what were the difficult things on your path?
I think the difficult things were while I'm developing a style, I'm also trying to figure out how do I want to stand in this art career? Right? I'm in the middle of like two different things of like having my own independent thing, and then I have the animation thing. And I'm like, well, do I want to play the industry thing where like I focus on this, I break my back, I work really hard, hopefully win some awards, get a promotion. Do I really want that? You're sacrificing a lot for that. And I think for me, being a young person, like when MTV closed down, when I got hired at MTV, I thought I was going to be there forever. But then when that closed down and I was young enough to see that happen, I was like, well, nothing's really promised. And when it closed down, I didn't feel like an artist because like my job was taken away from me. So I was like, how do I prevent that from happening? And I had to kind of like reinstill what being an artist was to me, how I wanted to carry that, right? So there's a lot of difficult things because it's just like you are trying to be part of it is really that you can't really turn it off. You have to kind of keep working on your own stuff. So that means like when you're tired of working, sometimes there's been times that at jobs, I purposely don't give like the 120% that I'm going to give, that I'm supposed to give, because there has to be something left at the end of the day for me. I have to be able to have enough energy to do a drawing when I get home or on the weekend. So that's something that I purposely do. And maybe I know for a fact that that's probably cost me like a supervisor position on this job, or maybe I wasn't the guy that stayed on weekends to do this. I don't regret any of those, but those are just decisions that you kind of have to make sometimes. It's like, I'm just going to have to live and die by that. Like, you know what I mean? It's all a hustle. And I'm kind of built for it. To be honest, it's always come naturally to me to be like freelance and to not have a steady job for a long time. That's always come natural to me. So it hasn't been that hard for me. But I know people who it has been and they don't like it and they end up switching. That's fine. That's too. It's not for everybody. But yeah, for me, I can't really say. When I moved out to California to work in animation, I didn't leave New York because I didn't have work. I was busy working. We just left because we're like, oh, let's go see how the other half lives before our kids start school. And I've been here ever since.
To me, you answered it. The hard part is which path do you choose to go by? The road's going to split.
Yeah.
Which way do I take? You were nice enough to do some work for me for a company that we never mentioned because we've told this story when Jerome was on too. We had you all set up to do some stuff before all those people at X company got all laid off and fired. So, but during that, I brought the high school kids with me to meet you. And a lot of them were in the arts and creative. And that's why I brought them to Designer Con and see how you work. And they kept saying to me afterwards, you really, you know kaNO? Well, you know him too now. You just met him. And they're in awe. And they start asking me questions that I couldn't answer. And one of them was, but he was an animator. Yeah. How did he get into galleries and how does he get into toys and how did he just do these things and how did he find these things and how did he get into this all areas? Because I got to tell it this way, because they look at me and I just have a corporate job. Like I did the opposite of you. They see you as like kaNO's got his hands in everything, and how did he get his hands in everything?
Yeah, I would say that I have to start that with I'm 46 years old. Like it didn't just happen. I'm not like a kid, right? Because I was young, I was in my early 20s too when I wanted to do these things. And the same energy, going back to what Rick was saying earlier, or asking me, was that energy that I had when I was young of trying to figure out and asking questions. I'm still like that with all the things I'm interested in. Like that curiosity, it's always a thing that, especially when you're coming out of school, you want to do it all. I remember when they would ask us to put together a portfolio, I'm like, this person's going to look at this portfolio and judge me. I want everything that I can do in here, like a painting to a sculpture to everything. I want to showcase everything that I do. Like all of these things, you want to do it all. And it's hard to reel in that energy when you're younger because that energy means you have to curate something. You have to shave away things in order to find what you want to be known for. And when you're young, you're not ready to take any options off the table yet. You're not ready for it. You want to do it all. Young people don't like hearing, nobody, not even I, right? Like hearing, you know what? There's not going to be enough time for you to get that done. You're not going to be able to do that thing. And that's the reality of it, right? So like the older we get, the more we're like, you know what? I can do those things, but what do I really love doing? And maybe I just want to do those things. Let me focus on, like, out of 25 things that I love doing, let me focus on these 5 things and make sure those are my core. So I think that I ended up doing all these things that if I would have planned out to do them, they wouldn't have happened for me. I kind of walked through life following my interests, asking questions, and it's a very serendipitous way of being for me. Like things happen in my life that I might have set the tone for it a year ago, meeting someone, asking questions, and then it comes to fruition. But I did not start 2024 with a list and a strategy of how to accomplish those things. I envy the people who can do that. I don't have a business plan for certain things, you know. And I truly feel that if I would have, they might have not worked out the way I wanted them to. You got to be open to kind of just let it happen. Like, for example, like working with the Bruce Lee Foundation, that's like a childhood dream, right? I wouldn't have known whose door to knock on to make that happen. But I happened to put out a Bruce Lee toy with somebody, so some company, and then I could have done any toy. They were like, "We want to just do a toy with you." Doing like, I want to do like my own Bruce Lee figure. Doesn't have to be called Bruce Lee, and it won't be his likeness. It'll be my adaptation of it. You get away with calling it the Dragon King. So let's do it. We love it. Later on, that's shown to the Bruce Lee Foundation, and they want to put it out like officially licensed. I couldn't have planned that. It just happened, and I'd like to think of it as because I'm always just following my interest and just working, putting the work out there and seeing what happens with it. So that opened doors for me. Basically, the way my thing worked is I got into animation. I made money. I was young. I saved some money. Animation took a long time for you to be able to do your own thing. If you wanted to pitch, guess what? You have to go through this whole process of pitching. It's like, oh, but the creators of the show, they get all the sexy shit. We're the guys doing all the work, and we just gotta stay and eat shit in a cubicle and fucking work all. It sucks when when they show you the spotlight. Guys who you work for are winning all the awards, and you're kind of just like, damn. It'd be nice to get a shout out every once in a while, right? So that part of my animation career kind of fueled me wanting to do my own thing. I was always like, I need to do something. So basically, I had enough money. I saved up. I was able to get this toy done. And when I put this toy out, it happened at a time where vinyl toys were huge. And it was a time where custom toys and art galleries were like talking to each other. So that kind of opened the door for people like me, people like Tristan, Scat, all of us. And we kind of start building like our careers from our toys almost. And once you become like a known name in that world, now you're putting out product. And when companies see you being self-reliant and independent about putting stuff out, they say, oh, there's a fan base there, and this guy's got some momentum behind him. Let's collaborate. We want a little piece of that energy that he has. You know how corporations are. You know, if this guy's hot, we want to put somebody on. So it's like, all right. And since they're knocking on your door now you're the guy who gets to say your price, right? And now these are like people with money, so that's like, oh yeah, we want to fly you here, we want to fly you there. And now I'm an animator that gets to go to Japan and paint a mural, all expenses paid trip. Well, if I didn't do any of that stuff for myself and I was just an animator, that doesn't happen to an animator or a character designer unless you're Lasseter, unless you're Brad Bird, you know what I mean? Unless you're the big shots, right? It's a long process, and I like to start it with my age. So I know what it is to be in your early 20s, and you put age on everything. When you see somebody who's amazing, you're like, how old is he? All right, I still got time to get that good. It's always like that. It's all, every kid is like, man, he's amazing, but how old is he? I mean, what are we talking here? Like, yeah, then you turn like 30, right? And you're not Jim Lee or you're just like, wait, that was supposed to happen. But it's just one of those things that's just like, you got to be patient with it. And it's harder now more than ever for young people because social media makes it look like everyone can do it like so quick. I have to say that it takes time and it took me time.
I think it's really fair that you're pointing out how hard it is to have that patience because, like you said, social media, you just see these random people blowing up seemingly overnight when reality is most of them have been hustling for years prior to or they just got lucky, right? There are the
Yeah,
overnight successes
that's
that
right.
are just pure timing and luck and the right combination of things. What advice would you give people to keep going, right? So people like, especially who have hit that are 30, 40, and they're like, I'm still not big. What would you tell all of those people to keep them going?
To be honest, I don't feel like I'm that big to be giving that advice because I feel like I'm a person who's put in the work, but I've also had some really good opportunities. And when those presented themselves, I was ready to do stuff with them. But it's not like hearing you say that stuff, and I'm like, well, I don't have a brand deal with North Face. I don't have a brand deal with Nike. Like, I don't have my own Jordan sneakers. So, like, I got a long way to go. And things that I want to do. The only thing I could say is the advice that has worked for me is to, and it's hard for me to follow my own advice, try to be steady and just put out the work. Because for me, whenever I want to jump the gun and skip some steps, I always got to think of like, all right, well, I made it this far and I made it this far because I actually put in the work. Like I can't bullshit it now and just get other things just off of the reputation of what I've done because that's what's worked this whole time. So whatever step you are, if you just got your Marvel deal to do a comic book and you want to do all these other things, just know that just keep putting that work in there because this doesn't happen overnight. And there's times when like another question I always get from artists is like, oh, artist block. For me, I don't sit there with artist block anymore because if I can't draw something, I don't force it. I just go do life shit, go play basketball with my son or go do push-ups or go watch a movie. I'm not gonna stress over unless it's like for certain jobs, like a comic book artist, you have to make it. If you're starting comic book on page one or a storyboard sequence on page one and the deadline doesn't change and you still have to come up with it and you have drawing block, that's different. That's all you. You got to figure it out. I don't have the answers for that. But if it's other stuff on your own, if it's your own stuff and you feel like in a creative slump and you can't come up with anything new, live life a little bit. You know, it's not that big of a deal. Another advice that I would give, which I try to be better about all the time, when I'm working and when things are super busy, I kind of just like I come on, man. I'm going out for lattes. I'm buying extra shit that I don't need. Like I'm like being irresponsible with money when the money's flowing, right? And then I'm kind of like, oh, then it's always gonna stop. There's always like it's momentum, right? So like save your money, man. So when you're not working, you can ride it out a little bit. Be smart about it. If you're gonna buy two pairs of Jordans, well, make sure you don't wear one of them so that you can sell them when you're broke. Wear one and sell the other one. Thing of like artists and financials and like trying to be better. Every year I'm starting like, I want to be better this year. That's something to keep track of. It's important to do that.
But
Yeah.
it's part of being an artist, kaNO, like and freelance. You're right, it's ebbs and flows, and people don't realize it's a business.
Yeah.
You have to, while you're working on this, you got to find the next job and you got to make sure your money's right. Different than working a 9 to 5 job. You own it, you own every aspect of it.
Yeah, it's tricky, man. It's really hard. But I mean, I love doing it. And I also just getting around to trying to learn some new programs, something I haven't done in a long time. Like I just realized it now. I was like, man, I can't remember the last new thing I learned. So, one of my New Year's resolutions is to learn a 3D program. That's also been my New Year's resolution for the last 7 years. So hopefully it happens this year. But I'm really excited about it. And I've been talking to a lot of 3D guys about it when especially when you're doing your own thing, you're trying to market your stuff, you're trying to get your work out there, and you're trying to create artwork. And then when's the space for growth? Like when was the time carved out so that you can learn something new? And that's tough. Another thing I have to say is the art job isn't for everyone. He's a security guard at the UN and he draws a lot. And he's a guy who I grew up. There's a couple of people that I grew up going to school with that drew, that were into art. They didn't have art careers, but now thanks to like iPad, they're back into it and they're just drawing for themselves and posting. And I'm like, that's fulfilling that you're doing it for yourself. You don't have to have the career to keep doing it, is what I'm saying. Like some people like stress out, like the creative career is too stressful to always gain employment. And what if you just want a regular paycheck, but you just want to keep creating art? That's fine too. Sometimes it's not as sexy as it looks. It's like crazy.
And thank you for saying it, because I think a lot of people, especially young creatives, tie their self-worth to their job as an
Yeah,
artist. And I think really, like to your point, it's not for everyone, right? And or it might be for you in different parts of your life, and that's totally okay to
yeah.
pivot and to grow, I think. In North Face, if you're listening, come give kaNO. This has been awesome, man. Where is
Cool.
the best way for people to come and find you?
The best way is through my Instagram at kaNO Kid. The best way to make me happy is to go to my web store and buy something. Link in the link tree on the Instagram. That would be awesome. But yeah, that's pretty much. I try to keep that website primarily. I try to keep it up to date and everything. So that's like the fancy website that makes me look like I know what I'm doing. And then yeah, animation work. I don't really have an animation portfolio up online anywhere. I don't know if I should have that. I kind of have a PDF that I give to like clients or like studios when I'm looking for work. And that's available by emailing me if you want to hire me as a character designer. Um, and I'll just send you that. But aside from that, just any companies out there that want to work with me on collaborations, I'd be more than excited to start the convo. And you can just email me through my website. And yeah, we could start that convo. Yeah, I'm always very excited to do collaborations with companies and stuff like that.
And kaNO, the way we always end this is we give our guests the last words. So any
Oh, good
last
grief.
words?
Last words. Man, I have so many pretentious things to say. They're embarrassing, but I don't know what to pick from. All right, I'll do this one. Last words. This is advice to old and young. All right, and that advice is never underestimate the power you have to make time. Right? You like that?
That's a deep one. That's a great way to end one,
Yeah.
kaNO, man. That's great. Thank you for your time, man. This has been a fabulous conversation, dude.
Yeah,
Oh,
man, no problem. Take that, Jerome Lou. You suck.
We're keeping that in, kaNO. We're keeping that in.
that stays in.
Do it. Do it.
The best one is his exit was all about Fast and the Furious.
Jerome Lou's?
Yes, it was literally.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Origins, A Creative Journey, a Designer Con podcast. Please follow and subscribe on whatever platform you're streaming this on, and check us out on Instagram at Origins, A Creative Journey. And if you have any suggestions or questions or comments, email us at deconpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure to get your tickets and hotel deals now for DesignerCon's 20th anniversary celebration in Las Vegas, Nevada, November 14th through 16th, 2025. I hope to see you there, but in the meantime, go make some art.